Hello, everyone. My name is Kori Marin. I am a broker and co-founder at Fox Marin. And today we're going to talk about the 5 biggest fears Toronto sellers have. So selling your home isn't just about signing on the dotted line, though admittedly, when the price is right, of course, that is the most fun part, right? But let's not forget, it's emotional, it is super stressful and very high stakes. And sellers, you got plenty to worry about these days, right? We've got political chaos. We have financial woes. We have affordability issues. We have inventory issues depending on your asset class and the tariff wars and these media headlines. So there is so much uncertainty out there, and it's understandable if you have a lot of fears heading into your sale process. So I want to address the top 5 fears. They have a lot to do with lowball offers, no offers, these unexpected costs, buyer demands and concessions, and even the fear of a buyer walking away from the deal at the very last minute. And can that actually happen? So here's the thing. These fears are super real, but they do not have to derail your plan. We're going to break it all down for you here on the Toronto Real Estate Podcast. Thank you so much for joining. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. I love to respond to all of your great comments. Hopefully they're constructive and we can meet eye to eye on a lot of these topics, because I know real estate is more emotional than ever before. So let's make it happen. All right, so let's just start here. Let's break down the seller fears. And I actually got some really good data. Now, this comes from the US, this graph that I pulled up on the screen for you, but I want to talk about them because this really solidifies what they are and what aligns with what my instincts are about sellers. And then I'm going to save the last one, which is bonus number 6 for the end, which we're going to address as well. So looking at this chart, 54% of people feel that they're going to be pressured to accept a low ball offer. 26% of these surveyed here feel that they're going to have to spend more on repairs and staging than they expected. So let's talk about that. 1% of respondents say the buyer of my home will insist on lots of concessions. And this is something that we've been dealing with for the first time in the Toronto market for a very long time. So I'm going to talk about some of my personal experiences with this and how you as a seller can deal with it. 21% of respondents are worried that buyers will back out of the deal at the last minute. And then I've skipped over a couple of these because I really want to talk about 15% of the respondents here saying they're worried that home prices will increase significantly after they sell. So this survey comes from American homeowners, so don't forget. And the source is Clever Real Estate Home Selling Fear Survey from December 2024. This is the most recent data I could pull to validate these topics I want to share and address with you today. All right, so let's jump in. Let's go into number 1, getting pressured to accept a low ball offer. So you have to remember that you are the homeowner. This is your asset. This is your property. This is your equity. This is your capital. Whatever way you want to look at it, this is your property, and you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. This is what we have to remember every single time. Just because you're listing your property does not mean you have to sell the property. This does not mean that you have to accept a low ball offer. So nothing makes a seller sweat more than a low ball offer. But to be honest, it's better than getting no offers. And when you list your home, you get really excited, and it's a very vulnerable experience to put your personal property on the market. And then boom, you get something that's way less than you expected or way below your asking price. And in today's market where buyers seemingly have more leverage, this is happening more often. But remember, as per the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, the average sale to list price ratio as of November 2025 hovered around 99% for all home types, and it's a bit closer to 98% for the condo market, which has been struggling more than the low rise market. So what I really want you to be working through when it comes to this fear is having a really smart, strategic pricing plan when you're working with your listing agent. You don't want to list too high. You don't want to list too low. You want to address that Goldilocks principle somewhere in the middle. instead of chasing the market. Now, in Toronto proper, downtown, especially in the low-rise entry-level market, you often see sellers list low, much lower than its actual market value, have an offer date, and then try to elicit multiple offers for a bidding war to drive the price up. This is still a strategy that is working in certain neighborhoods, certain price points, certain streets, certain property types and locations. Of course, that's a strategy to explore. But if you're not going to go for the bid strategy, which doesn't always work, and in this market, it's a bit more touch and go, you might be using a strategy that's a bit more temperate, like list your property for XYZ and accept offers at any point. And if you choose this strategy, which is a great strategy to have, depending again on what type of property you're selling, then you might need to expect to bend a little bit to the buyer's needs. With saying that, that means, in my opinion, you may want to consider listing a little higher than what you and your agent believe the market value of the property is, and then have a little leeway to negotiate with buyers one-on-one and negotiate down a little bit. Now, I would say there is a bit more of a temperature out there right now for buyers to come in significantly lower than your list price if you're using this particular strategy. And that is okay. If they do come in low, you have options. You don't have to accept it. And this is where I want you to really be communicating with your listing agent, about that very offer. One thing is that offer can be used as leverage to get other offers to come to the table. So that's one advantage of a lowball offer. And the second thing is you have every right to negotiate. You can do several things in this situation. You can outright reject a really shitty offer. You can accept it if you're like, you know what, I just want to sell this thing and move on. I'm willing to take the loss. I just want to move on. Or the third tool you have is to negotiate. And this is something we haven't really seen in Toronto for a very long time because money was just going left, right, and center to acquire whatever people could acquire. So you have the opportunity to negotiate and bridge that gap. So let's say you're selling your property for $1 million and somebody comes in with $900,000 and a bunch of conditions and you're really pissed off about it. You as the seller have every right to sign back that offer. And you can sign back with your own terms and your own price and what you believe the property is worth. You can budge a little bit, you could budge a lot, but sometimes you'll see people meet in the middle eventually, especially if you have two good agents on the opposite sides of the bargaining table that are communicating back and forth. And trust me, I have seen offers ping back and forth 5 times, 6 times, even up to 10 times to find that meeting place. So just because it's a low ball offer doesn't necessarily, you might not come to meetings of the mind. You really want to have a strong marketing and you want to have a great staging position when you put your property on the market, especially in Toronto right now where you're competing against other properties. And remember, even in a buyer's market, I'm just going to make an edit here. And finally, remember, even in a buyer's market like Toronto in certain segments right now, buyers still do expect to see some back and forth. They are not that naive unless they're working with an agent that's not really transparent and communicating with them. A lot of the time when a lowball offer goes out, the buyer is truly expecting the seller to come back with a sign back. So don't get discouraged with lowball offers. Try to leverage it, make it work. Try to get to the finish line. All offers have potential, and we have seen massive differentials between a starting offer and a finished firm offer in terms of dollars in conditions by the time the negotiation comes to an end. Got it? All right. Let's talk about fear number 2, the pre-list repair and staging costs. So sellers often worry about these costs because honestly, there's truly always something. I want to talk about this. This comes from the Home Staging Institute, and this is going to address staging first. And these are some good stats for you to see. So 25% of realtors believe that home staging doesn't increase the property's sale price, but it does help attract more buyers to the home, which means the property can sell faster. Similarly, nearly 85% of realtors agree that a staged home will sell faster than an unstaged home. 100% this is true. Homes that are staged sell 73% faster than those that are not staged. 77% of buyers agree that staging a home makes it easier for buyers to visualize the property as their future home. Now you have to remember that 15% of the population only 15% of the population has the ability to visualize. A lot of people have no sense of space. They have no sense of scale. They have no idea where furniture will go, a sense of flow or potential. So you really have to tell this story for the potential purchasers. And this is where home staging, and then we'll talk about repairs quickly as well, come into play. A staged home can receive up to 10% more online views than an unstaged home, not shocking at all. And 95% of buyer agents agree that home staging has at least some effect on buyers' view of the home. So being a real estate brokerage that focuses very much on the aesthetic of our listings, I can tell you from my heart and the depths of my soul that staging makes a difference. This makes a significant impact to how your pictures look, how your property videos look, how that first impression looks. And when you're competing against other properties on your street or in your same condo building, you want to be the standout. Trust me, we have listed the most generic, boring, cookie cutter, brown, crappy view condos and staged them and have received multiple offers on them because of staging. In fact, I feel almost guilty when the staging comes out because then you see what the property actually looks like. You need to emotionally connect with your buyers. So it's a really helpful litmus test. So not only is it about staging, but it's about these repairs. So I want you to use this formula. We recommend that you, the seller or the owner, spend about 1 to 3% of the total value of your home as a ratio on preparing the property for sale maximum. So this is inclusive of any cosmetic upgrades and repair work. So oftentimes what we do is when we're looking at a property for the first time, we'll walk through and we'll make recommendations. We never expect the sellers to renovate the property. We want a refresh to the property. So there's things that you can do to make the property look so much better and fresher before you list it on the market. So A, you're going to get views. B, you're going to get multiple views. And then C, that is going to elicit offers. So ideas like this include upgrading your backsplash, painting, changing your light fixtures, fixing cracks in the wall, redoing the grout in your washroom. All of these things, we list this out for all of our selling clients. And then we get our trades to come in and quote for the work. Once the quotes come in and we've done our full pricing on the property, we can evaluate what is the most important stuff to do on this list from this quote versus the value of the property. How much balls to the walls does this seller need to go to be able to elicit this price? And you got to be really smart about it. The second thing is that your listing agent and their brokerage might cover some of these costs. So we work with all of our sellers to figure out a business plan. Who's paying for what services? Who's paying for staging? Who's paying for repair work? Who's doing the window washing? Who's paying for landscaping? All of these things need to be addressed with your listing agent. You need to have a very transparent conversation about it. So if you're selling $1 million property, we recommend that you're spending about $10,000 to $30,000 to prep the property for sale. Of course, obviously, this is really dependent on the current condition of the property and how much the seller/owner has spent on the property over the years. If they have just not put a nickel into the property and it's dilapidated and it smells like mold and they haven't done a termite inspection and there's water dripping from the ceilings, obviously they're going to have to spend a bit more money to get that return back on the property. However, there's a lot of pride of ownership and the property looks fantastic and it looks move-in ready, the lesser one needs to spend to prepare it for sale. So one thing that's really helpful here is to get a pre-list home inspection done to the property first so that you can address some of these major issues up front before you're surprised later on when a buyer discovers that, you've got foundational issues at the property when they do their own home inspection. So you can get ahead of some of this repair work first. And get a sense of this budget before you go to market. Because if you do a pre-list inspection and find out that you need to do $6,000 worth of work on very generic upgrades, and then you know that you're going to have to pull back on your budget on some of the more pretty stuff, some of the cosmetic stuff. So the pre-list home inspection on low-rise properties is going to be really helpful to you as the seller to figure out and navigate where to budget dollars when prepping your home for sale. You want to set a repair and staging budget, and I want you to stick to it. Don't forget, you are not renovating the property. All right. A lot of people feel very vulnerable about having people see their home. And so they want to do everything that they would want to do as if this is going to be in some home decor magazine. So you do not need to redo your kitchen and washrooms in all cases to showcase the property at its highest and best in its current condition. As I mentioned, you want to negotiate these service fees with your listing agent and their brokerage. Have a very transparent conversation about this, and this should all be listed out in your listing agreement with your agent so everyone knows who's paying for what, and all contracts and quotes need to be signed off by all parties before you go to market. So there isn't that surprise, which is what a lot of people are afraid about, are these hidden costs. And I want you to focus on high impact updates. So I want your home to look move-in ready without you, breaking the bank. So we have some great podcasts about how you can do that, which I will link below in the show notes for you. They might be a really good resource, particularly if this is a fear for you, these hidden costs. I have some really great ways for you to cheat some of these upgrades without having to spend tens of thousands of dollars to do this. All right. Moving on. Let's talk about fear number 3. Buyers are demanding too many concessions during the conditional period. So for example, their home inspection. So what does this mean? All right. So let's just say you've gotten through your repair costs. You've got your house staged. You might have even got a lowball offer or something like that. And now you've actually sold the property. But the property has sold conditionally on the buyers doing some bonus due diligence. So an example of this would be a financing condition. So they need to check with their bank to make sure that everything's A-okay with their funding and the appraisal, or they might need to have the condo status certificate reviewed by a real estate lawyer to make sure that the corporation is in a healthy financial state. Or C, they might do their own buyer home inspection. And this is where people finding more and more are getting nervous because they feel, again, very exposed and vulnerable. They finally have sold their property. Market conditions are really stressful. They got a decent price. And now the buyer is going to walk through with a professional inspector. Perhaps they might bring their parents and they might discover things in this inspection that they did not anticipate. And so this is a major fear. In fact, 70% of sellers worry that buyers will either back out at the last minute during the conditional period or expect too many repairs or a price reduction. So here is an interesting stat. In 2023, industry resources suggest only a small percentage of home sales failed to close in Ontario and in Toronto, and closer to the order of 5% or less in most areas. The majority of buyers completed their purchases, but a noticeable minority of transactions did fall through due to financing snags, unsatisfactory inspections, or buyers simply walking away. And NAR, which is the National Association of Realtors in the US, shows similar results at about 5% collapse rate nationally. So less than 5% of people actually walk away from the deal during the conditional period. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of peace of mind. So a couple of things here. So you really want to make sure that you're working with buyers that are qualified and pre-approved and that they've got good financing and they are avoidant of cold feet risks. So your listing agent should be asking questions to the buyer's agent about the qualifications of the buyer. All right. The next thing is that you want to request a decent, healthy deposit with the offer. In Toronto, it's a minimum of 5% of the total offer price. And in more luxury properties, it's closer to 10%. So that's also a key indicator. And then you and your agent want to set firm boundaries about concessions. So let's just go back to this idea of a home inspection. We don't want anything that is unreasonable or excessive after the buyer has completed their home inspection. But again, is a very vulnerable thing to have to sit through. So once the inspector goes through, they produce a report. And an inspector's job, and you have to remember this, is to find problems. That is their job. And in Toronto, where a lot of houses are over 100 years old, there are going to be problems. And so, especially if you haven't done a pre-list inspection, some of these might be new. Like they might find knob and tube, or they might find a leak, or they might find some cracks in the foundation. They're going to find that there's a missing handrail heading into the basement, or loose stones at the exterior of the property. There is a ton of things that they're going to be able to find. So you need to make sure that you are prepared for these findings. And depending on the agent and the buyer's style, some of them are going to be like, oh yeah, I'm just happy that I got the price. And of course, there's going to be issues. This house was built in 1890, and I'm prepared to take on this because I'm well-informed. Everything's been transparent, and I'm ready to firm up on the deal. However, other buyers, particularly now in this market where buyers feel super empowered, they might come over to you and to your agent and ask for these concessions, meaning they might have a list of things they want fixed before they're willing to waive the condition and firm up on the deal. So again, this is really dependent on the situation, really dependent on the case, really depends on the buyers. I would say this would happen more with first-time home buyers than it would with a more experienced buyer. This would likely happen more with an inexperienced buyer agent. And if you have an inexperienced buyer agent with inexperienced buyers, and then you add in parents on board, then almost for sure you're going to be asked for a list of concessions and or a price reduction. But this is where you really need to be smart about how you handle this. So, what is your bandwidth for said concessions? And so things we've seen that are totally fine, like making sure that the light bulbs are working on the hood fan, or they're fixing a dripping tap, or they need a new air filter, or the garage door is not opening and closing smoothly, or the remote for the garage door needs to be replaced. Some of these are concessions that are small and kind of finicky, but that you as the seller are happy to fix to make sure that the buyer is happy in their new home after you've exchanged keys. Now, this can get more extreme where buyers get really cold feet and they get nervous and they hear things like knob and tube would be a big one, or, a crack in the foundation means there's engineering problems with the property, there's structural issues. So there's some red flags out there that are more scary than some of these like smaller handyman items. And in those cases, this is where you really need to have great communication between the selling agent and the buyer agent about said requests. If these things come up, you can just be like, no, we're not going to do this at all. B, yes, you're happy to fix it and you'll show proof of work. Or C, you're willing to give a price reduction up to X amount of dollars to go towards these repairs. Sometimes you could negotiate a holdback. There's certain things that can, and the biggest thing is communication. And so if your agents are communicating on both sides, then usually you can work your way through this. I would say this can be exceptionally annoying beyond belief for selling clients. This is where things get very real and you'll start negotiating over the smallest, tiniest things. Like we've seen people fighting over inclusions and garden gnomes and nanny cameras and scratches in the floor. And the other thing I just want to remind you, especially if you're a buyer listening to this podcast, you are not buying new construction. You are buying residential resale. The home has already been used and lived in, so it is not going to be 100% perfect, brand spanking new. There are going to be issues with the property or small, minor defects. So I can see why this gets sensitive for both sides of the negotiation table. Sellers, I get you. This is where people just get very aggravated. My recommendation, though, is to work through it. The last thing you want to do is say, screw these people. We're not doing anything for them. They got a great price. I already gave them the close day that they wanted. Screw it. We're going to let this deal die and we're going to list the property again on the market. Don't recommend doing that in this particular market conditions right now. I would say work as much as you can with the buyer on these requests. And again, try to find a happy medium if you can. Please comment below if you've been in this situation before and you want to talk about any of the concessions your buyers have requested. We've seen a whole list of things over the years, and sometimes it gets really annoying. All right, moving on. Fear number 4. Buyers trying to walk away from the deal after it's firm. All right. This means you've negotiated, you've come with your terms, your conditions. Conditions have been waived. All concessions have been dealt with. All the sticking points have been worked through. The deal is firm. And now you're going to be closing in a future date. The deposit the buyers brought to the table, which remember is about 5% or more of their offer price, is sitting in the listing brokerage's trust account, or may be with a lawyer's trust account. But most of the time, it's sitting with the listing brokerage's trust account. So they've already put cash towards their future down payment. This one is exceptionally rare, but I would say this is one of sellers' biggest fears. And we've had this conversation many, many times with sellers at this exact point in the transaction. So in Ontario, buyers who back up after firming up a deal risk losing their deposit and facing legal action for damages if the seller relists at a lower price. So I'm going to read some of this to you. Buyer's remorse is not part of real estate. Once the buyer and seller have signed the purchase agreement and all conditions have been satisfied, both parties must abide by the contract. There is typically not much leeway to cancel a real estate purchase. Buyers may feel they have valid reasons to back out of buying a house, including that they've overpaid or their financial circumstances have changed. Still, those reasons are not enough to justify the potential consequences of walking away. If the buyer walks away, they will likely not only forfeit their deposit, but the seller could also sue them for any loss in the value of the property upon resale. So let's say there was an agreement to purchase the house for $850,000. Closing day comes and the buyers back out for whatever reason. The home then goes back on the market. The best offer is now only $700,000. The home buyers who backed out on closing could be sued for the difference in price in order to make up for the money the sellers lost. The buyers who walked could end up owing $150,000. This nightmare scenario has just played out in Gamoff versus Hugh. The buyers not only lost $30,000 deposit, but were also ordered by the Ontario Superior Court of Justice to pay $400,000 in lost value after they backed out. If you find yourself in this predicament, you may also be responsible for the entirety of the seller's legal fees and mortgage carrying costs and any other losses suffered by the seller, which could end up totaling almost as much of the cost of the property that you walked away from. Okay, so after hearing that, just know that this is very rare for those reasons. Very, very rare. And in fact, and I'm going to touch wood, this has never happened to Ralph or myself over our decades of experience in this business. Okay, the only time this has ever happened to me, which is what I've been involved in, is actually when it came to closing, the seller decided she did not want to move. The seller decided that she did not want the transaction to go through. And there was a little bit of a hiccup in that situation, but the buyers got their deposit back. And I believe the seller paid like an inconvenience fee of about $10,000 to the buyers in this particular situation. But in all of my years in this business, I've never had this happen to me. So if you're in a situation that feels precarious and you're concerned about this, the best thing to do is call your real estate lawyer, and they should be focusing on finding a resolve with the buyer's real estate lawyer. Remember, you want them focused on real estate. You don't want to be using like Uncle Bob, who does family law in Kincardine. All right. You want to have real estate experts on your side, and you need to stay calm as much as you can stay calm, because I know this is a podcast about fears, a video about fears, but I want you to stay calm. And it's all about communication. So you're communicating with your agent and the lawyers. And in best case scenario, the lawyers are working together to find a resolve. All right. So bottom line, once the ink is dry, buyers can't just walk away. And if they do, their deposit is likely gone and they could owe more in damages. So while this fear is real, it's also very rare. And since I've been in this business so long, it's never happened. Oh my gosh, I hope I did not just manifest it by talking about this. So let's just not create that universe, right? All right. Let's move into fear number 5, selling too soon and watching prices skyrocket. No one wants to sell their home and watch these prices skyrocket 6 months later. Major seller FOMO. But timing the market, almost impossible. And you have to think about Toronto real estate cycles. Right now, everything's just so unpredictable with interest rates, this political chaos, tariffs, what's happening with our election, when's there going to be an election? Like the chances of this happening to you right now in the first quarter of 2025 to me feels very, very slim, particularly if you're selling a condo, but it could happen. And I want you to remember that if it does, you likely are selling and then you're going to be buying on the other side of that most likely, which means that you're buying in the same conditions. So you're benefiting from lower or more moderate prices if you're buying in the same market that you sell. Where you're going to see this being more of an issue is if sellers sell at the lower end of the market, if we ever know when we've hit the bottom, and then they leave for whatever reason. This happened a lot during COVID, where sellers were capitalizing on the height of this crazy market that we were in with very, very low interest rates. Then they were taking their windfall and then moving out of the city, let's say to Hamilton, for example, and then realizing 2 or 3 years later, like, oh my God, I don't want to be living in Hamilton. I want to be back into the city. And then looking around and being like, oh my gosh, I'm now priced out of the market. So that's a tale of working in 2 different markets. So if you're selling and buying in the same market, generally you don't have to worry about this at all. I mean, could it happen? For sure. But I would not be stressed about this as much as people do get stressed about it. Timing is important. You need to be monitoring what's happening in your neighborhood, your street, your building, who's winning, who's losing, and make sure that you're not listing like on a long weekend, for example, and you have a good agent and a smart strategy, and that you understand the pros and cons of your timing. Is it really smart to list, January 2nd, on a Saturday, or are you smarter to wait for your beautiful property with great gardens to be listed in mid-May, where you can show off the gardens and there's been a couple successful sales in your street or in your area and their strategy worked. So there's proof that this could be good timing. I mean, there's so many nuances to timing, but the FOMO fear of prices just skyrocketing the day after you sell or within 6 months to me seems very slim right now. Okay. So you have to remember that the average selling price is down about 2.2% versus last year, and that the actual amount of transactions or deals moving through the system is down 27.4% compared to last year. So I don't really see the velocity of the market really truly coming back here for a while, particularly in condos. We need interest rates to come down more. We need some stability when it comes to the political environment that we're in right now. Affordability is a massive problem, and we need this tariff thing just to bubble down just a bit. All right? We're getting there, people. We're going to get through it together. We're going to do this. Okay? So when you are selling, you need to focus on your own needs. Do not focus on market speculation. Please try to avoid the media headlines as hard as it is. God, social media and like any media headlines right now, they're so fear-based. I mean, I get sucked into them all the time. And if you're hesitant about selling and you need to move for whatever reason, or you have an asset that you're not confident you're going to get a great price on, and that would probably be in the condo market right now, maybe you consider renting it. Rent it out for a couple of years. Let's say you need to move to Vancouver or you're moving to London, England, or whatever it is for work, and you've got a condo and you're not really sure that you're going to get a great price. Have a conversation with an astute listing agent and their brokerage and talk about the pros and cons of selling right now. And maybe it's best that you rent for a while until there is a little bit more stability in the condo market. You cannot time the market perfectly, but you can definitely make decisions for your own life goals. And I know that Ralph and I abide by this as well when it comes to our real estate portfolio. And there's been some big wins over the years and there's some big losses at other times. There's one building that I cannot even drive by to this day because it just makes me nauseous, like sick to my stomach as to what I sold that condo for. It was so low compared to what the properties are even selling for today that every time I drive by that particular condo building, I have to like drive by it like this. Okay, so remember, if prices rise, remember you're likely buying in the same market, so it balances out. Make sense? Okay. I do want to do a separate podcast about this in a later date, another video, but I actually think over all of these 5 fears, there's another bonus fear. And I see it all the time because I primarily work with sellers and work on marketing our properties here at Fox Marin. And that is dealing with your shit, your stuff, your clutter, your basement, everything you've stuffed into your closet, your kids' stuff that you've been holding on to for 20 years, the junk in your backyard, the junk in your garage. The clutter is the fear, right? So I want to actually do a whole separate video about how to deal with your stuff because I actually think out of all of these things, I think you guys can wrap your head around the top 5 fears that I indicated in this video. But this one is just one that sellers really, really struggle with. They feel very vulnerable about, embarrassed by, procrastinate like crazy. It's amazing to me to see full-grown adults procrastinate on this. I mean, we will do a consult for sellers in May. They want to list in the fall. We revisit the property, with our stylists and our contractors in September, and the sellers have not touched one thing. They haven't packed one thing. They haven't donated one thing to charity. Or done one minor repair. So we're going to talk about the emotionality of people's stuff and their issues of not being able to let go. Definitely a very challenging part of the selling process for a lot of my clients. Maybe I just attract them, but people have a lot of stuff, and especially in residential properties that have been their family home where they have raised their kids, the struggle is super, super real. So I hope you found value in this content today. I'm just so grateful that you stayed with me to the end of this. I would love to hear your stories. I'd love to hear your personal anecdotes, any of the fears that you have about selling. Obviously, we're all very nervous right now about market conditions and our property values and how hard we work to acquire them. Or maybe you are thinking about buying something and you're like, is this a good time to buy? I'm really not sure. I would love to hear from you. Happy to address all of your thoughts down below. Please do that. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, my name is Kori Marin and I am with Fox Marin, a brokerage that focuses on central and downtown Toronto. Have a great day, everyone. Cheers.